Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Live podcast, where we explore the ideas, innovations, and people shaping the future of longevity. If you're interested in the future of how to save for retirement longevity, innovation, and building solutions that truly meet people where they are, this is the episode you won't want to miss. Today's guest is special. I happen to know her. We've crossed paths very briefly and then finally united. For my benefit, of course.
And mine.
I'm excited to be with Dr. B. That's how she wants me to refer to her, so I will, and I love calling her Dr. B. She consults, trains, and writes on a range of topics, including effective leadership, addressing cognitive distortions, including biases, communication and conflict using brain science, and more. Dr. B began her coaching and speaking practice over 2 decades, and has also served thousands of clients around the globe through her seminars, retreats, keynotes, leadership, and team consulting and coaching. She's also an author, which she didn't tell me to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. And she really crafted an amazing book about time, and that's really what caught my eye to speak to her about time, especially given our audience with Prime Life Podcast. Dr. B, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited that you're here. Fill in the blanks for our audience. Tell them a little bit more about yourself and how you kind of came to doing what you're doing. And by the way, before she starts, Dr. B is extraordinarily humble, so take that.
Thank you. You're sweet. And to my benefit, I hope you heard that little plug in. Meeting you in person and having that conversation that led to this podcast was an absolute additional joy to a wonderful evening we shared together. So thank you for that. And thank you for allowing me to be on this podcast and talk about time. And yes, a little bit about me. I came to this career kind of in a winding road, as they say. I started off in human resources. I went into marriage and family therapy, and then I got my doctorate in educational leadership. And I combined those 3 interests and experiences and expertises into the coaching and consulting and leadership development practice that I've had for now 22 years. Over that time, yes, I did. My most recent book is called The Book, there's a whole story about that. We'll get to that later. But that was my 8th book that I published in 2025. And so I've had a number of books before then, including, I never include my dissertation, so that would make it 9, 10 if you want to count the one that I wrote when I was in middle school, because, who doesn't write an autobiography when they're in middle school? But I did as a project. Anyway.
Hardly
but yeah,
anyone, I'm going to say.
Yeah, exactly. But it's beautiful. It's covered. If anyone's watching this versus just listening, it's covered in contact paper, which is amazing. And it has a photo of me in my Madonna era, which, of my age, Madonna era was pretty significant. So yeah, I'm really honored to be able to help people look at things just different enough that they can really shift the direction and experience of their lives. I watched people growing up suffer through their existences and, for my parents finally end that journey at their hands. And I am hell-bent on helping people look at life and time and the experience of all of that, of pain, of challenge, of joy, differently, so that they can work better together, they can be better people, so they can be better leaders, and be able to really maximize the experience they have here, that we have together.
I love that. And many individuals that listen to this podcast are contemplating new beginnings. Maybe they're retiring, maybe they're unretiring, maybe they've been in a position or a job that they've been, to your point, existing, and they want to feel more alive. But also, as we age and we perhaps become caregivers, you alluded to that about your parents and all of that, lots of changes happen. And time, I never thought I'd say this, but Time has changed for me, especially in the last few
Yes.
years, in terms of how quickly it goes by sometimes and how it doesn't in other cases. What spurred you to write a book about time? Because I think that is a perfect topic for
Yeah.
any
So
generation.
I want to say one thing about this idea to answer. There's a two-part to what you said. One is, why do we experience time differently over the course of our lives? And you and I had a preliminary conversation about this off air, but it does. Time and our experience of time changes as we grow. It changes depending on what our challenges are. It depends on how we're looking forward or looking back or looking in. That direction of focus has a lot to do with our experience of time. And for me, I have to give credit. My younger daughter actually bullied me into writing this book about time, not unlike most of my books, they did not come from my own ideas. They came from other people saying, "You know what you should do? You should write a book about this." And there I go, and I'm off writing a book. The book, and it's actually, the book about time is called The Book, and I'm going to give you the subtitle because I got to be in charge of it. But the original title of the book, The Book, came from my younger daughter, who said, "Mom, you need to write a book, and you need to write it, and you need to call it The Book." And I said, "Baby, I love you, but that's a terrible marketing decision. Like, who writes a book about and calls it The Book?" I said, "What is this book about?" Because she kept at it, and she said, "Oh, it's about time." And I said, "Oh, okay, that's pretty deep for a 9-year-old." And I asked, "So can I call it Book It?" And she said, "No, it has to be called The Book." And this child, growing into an adult, pestered me every single moment she had the opportunity. Every book I wrote, every time I celebrated that, she said, "Well, where's the book? When are you going to write the book?" So back in late 2024, when she was going into her senior year in college, I decided that I would surprise her at graduation in the spring of 2025 by writing the book. And so I ended up gathering 28 of her friends, loved ones, coaches, teachers since elementary school, et cetera, to contribute their own perspectives on their own challenge with time. So it became almost like a group project, in a sense, of these nuggets of wisdom from people in like her world, and also my own reflections on tools and ways that we can perceive time. The subtitle I got to pick because she got to pick the book. So the subtitle is, and I'm going to say this very articulately so everyone knows what I'm saying. Okay. It is How to Navigate Clock Suckers and Lead a Happy, Abundant Life. So the things that draw our, and yes, I'm being cheeky, but the things that draw the time down, the things that make us experience time in a way that is not maximizing it, is not pleasurable, is not, goal seeking or enjoyment seeking, those are clock suckers. And so I wanted to help people navigate those pieces about time so that they could live the best possible life. Yeah.
I am very intrigued, though, about your daughter. So,
yes,
it's not
go
something
for it.
we talked about. Well, first of all, she must be an old soul, as I like to say, and that's a compliment, by the way. Yeah. But also, I wonder, and did she ever tell you why she was obsessed with the book about time?
Yeah, I think she was less obsessed with the book about time itself and more about a book called The Book. Okay. And I think it was because I have never gone away from a paper planner. So our lives were dominated by what was on mommy's calendar and what was in the book. So I think in that perceptive, when we've had the conversation, that's part of it. I do think that both of my daughters have, and everyone picks up different parts of the lesson. We all know that if we have multiple children, you're like, how did that one get that? And that one get that, right? Exactly. Like they were both in the same room at the same time when I said it. Yes. But I do think that both of my daughters are very aware of the importance of the management of time. And they both have their own unique journeys and challenges and successes with how that looks, because they've watched me as a single parent, as a business owner, making a lot of big decisions and shifts and changes that all relied on the perception, experience, enjoyment, struggle with time.
And I always tell our guests who are entrepreneurs who have it all on the line that I tip my hat. I am a former entrepreneur, and I know firsthand, and it wasn't a side hustle, what goes on with the
Yeah.
blood, sweat, and tears, as I like to call it. I say that in a positive way but the persistence and resilience that you have to have, especially in your case where you said you've had to pivot, single
Yeah.
mom, raising the girls,
Yeah.
getting your PhD, you didn't just have it, you had to
No.
then, navigate. I have a lot of respect and admiration for
Thank
you.
you.
And I know when we did finally meet in person, it was also a joy for me because I've seen Dr. B on LinkedIn. I've seen Dr. B on Facebook. Our friends are mutual. That's a good sign right there.
Right.
So I love that.
Yeah.
So dipping into the next couple of questions, what have you learned about how we experience the passage of time? And if you wouldn't mind, start with maybe the 50 plus group and then
absolutely.
maybe wind back. Of course, this is your conversation. It's your conversation.
Hey, listen, I'm 50 plus, so I'm just going to leave it at plus. We're not going to talk about how much plus. We're just going to say plus. Yeah. I think when I think back so let me back up. When I was writing the book, how I wrote the intro, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, big shout out to Daybreak Coffee Roasters in Glastonbury, Connecticut. I go in there every day, and I was there writing this book, and I was sitting there, and it came to me that what perfect analogy and framework for looking at the passage of time than witnessing the people of all the different ages and stages and complications and decision points who circle through, linger, or rush out of a coffee shop. And so I started observing some of that dynamic. And when I think about people in our kind of relative age group of, 50 plus, those parts of time now, we look at it, and as we experienced time early on, we kept looking for that next gateway. Oh, when I'm a teenager. Oh, when I graduate. Oh, when I go to college. Oh, when I get my first job. When I buy my house. Whatever those marks are that seem to be the checklist of how we are going to pass through our lives. We notice that the runway is all in front of us, and we're thinking about someday, and we'll get there, and when this happens, and when this happens. And that scope starts to narrow and the runway shortens as we're in 50 plus, and what we have in front of us is in ways can be far more rich than what preceded it, but also has to be so much more intentional because there aren't as many correction opportunities as the runway gets shorter. And so making those decisions and looking forward to retirement, and we all know we're all going to die. Like, that's the one certainty, death and taxes.
Exactly.
So I think it creates this impending nature of time in a way that is just very differently shaped in our minds. And time is experienced as perception. There's not necessarily a reality of it. Two people don't experience the same moment in the same way.
Yeah, and time is valuable. And I used to say, I don't say it as much, but time is money. But I am curious, in your research and when you were interviewing for your book, did you find as people got older, because they understood perhaps that runway wasn't as long, that they were making decisions to not perhaps spend time with certain people or spend time doing certain things any longer? And I have to say that's happened to me personally. And it's a little jarring at times because I've said, I asked myself, why are you doing that? Like, what's changed? And just curious if that's something you heard and what that may be. How did you respond to that?
Yeah, I definitely heard that. And I also heard it, interestingly enough, Mary, by people who had had significant tragic life events.
Oh, interesting.
Because I think that again, we all experience time differently. We all have these pivoting moments. But for people who have faced, a possible death sentence of a medical, problem, or they've had a relative close to them die at an early age or in tragic circumstances, or another near-death experience, time starts to change its weight.
Oh.
And so you start looking at, and so looking back at the book that I just wrote, there are 4 pillars of time. It's not just about efficiencies. It's not just about how do I color code my inbox so that I get through things, best. It's not about the alarms I set on my phone. Oh, those are all very good efficiencies, but that's the last pillar. That's the last of the 4 pillars that I talk about. And the first 3 are presence, intention, and decision making. And what you're talking about is, I think, the combination of those 3, which is how can I be intentional about the decisions I'm making, about who I'm spending time with, how I'm spending that time, and how can I be present in those moments so that I'm actually in the moment I'm in and not thinking back on a moment I've left or wishing for a moment that hasn't yet come. And how can I make effective decisions about how I prioritize the activities that I have, the relationships that I build or allow to release? How do those things go together? So to answer your question on what I found in talking to people is that those people who had a wake up moment, either by looking at the TikTok of time, not the other TikTok, because that's a different one, that they were able to see that. There were some who were still lost in the fog of still racing toward this achievement basis, or this old contract about what it means to have succeeded at life, and hadn't yet made those same value decisions about how they wanted to look at and create these last chapters.
I love what you just shared, and I know our audience is going to appreciate that, because I haven't quite thought of it that way. And I'm sure we will put in the show notes how individuals can get a hold of your book for sure. And I know I need to read it as well.
Thank you.
It sounds exactly almost the information that I think many of us need to read and understand. And I think the point is too, it's like you're not alone. Others are experiencing this.
Yeah.
Can you share with all of us how we can use our time more wisely?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. NASA insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Yeah, and I think it does go back to those pillars, right? So the use of time will pass, whether you use it on TikTok or you use it addressing the TikTok, those two kind of spaces. And I think it's about being very intentional about how it is that you spend that time. And what the book actually offers, and again, I don't make a lot of money off of the book, so I'm not here to sell it. I'm here to offer it as a resource.
Of course.
But I think it is a toolkit. There are, I think, 52 tools in it that are 2 or 3 pages long that just say, hey, have you thought about it this way? Could you look at it this way? Could you shift time this way? And one of the things that I started working on with my clients years and years ago was something I call strategic life planning. So I do a lot of strategic planning with companies, but I wanted to assist people in looking at strategic planning. And that comes down to what are the things that make you feel like you come alive? What are the places where you feel like Chick St. Mahai would say in flow, where time seems to disappear because you're so at one with your purpose in the universe, with your, sense of self. And for me, I come down to, and no one will be surprised at I pick 3 words, and I encourage others to do the same, of picking 3 words that demonstrate that sense of purpose in your life. And for me, it's to guide, to inspire, and to connect. And if I'm not guiding or inspiring or connecting on a daily basis, there's something in that day that didn't feel like I was aligned with myself. That doesn't need to be done in this job. I could guide, inspire, and connect doing just about anything. I could be landscaping. I could be a police officer. I could be a retired person volunteering at my local, health clinic. Like, it doesn't matter. It matters, but it's not the important piece of where you do it and how you do it, but that you do it. And I think that's what helps us to invest our time and our energies and our gifts into the world in a way that matters. I want to go back to a quick story. When I was teaching CCD, it's Catholic education for children.
Know it well.
Yes, some people are like, CC, what? Yeah, anyway, CCTV. Yeah, anyway.
Well, I'm glad you explained that. But
yeah, so anyway, in my Catholic phase, so I was teaching CCD to young children, and I was the 2nd grade group. So they're going into their first communion. And so this little boy came up to me, and I had them call me Miss Bridget. And he came up and he said, Miss Bridget, what's heaven like? And I said, sir, I have not been, so I could not tell you. Yeah. And I said, please ask your parents, because I don't want to be the only one you're asking this question to, but I will answer because you asked. We'll just call him little Johnny. And so little Johnny sat and looked at me with rapt attention. And I said, first of all, I know that there are tons of puppies and endless chocolate. Pretty sure. And he giggled, right? And I said, and then I think you're asked 3 questions. Did you have fun? Did you use the gifts I gave you to the best of your ability? And did you try to leave every situation better than you found it? And to me, that's about using time more wisely, is that if your North Star are trying to answer those 3 questions in every situation you can possibly apply them to, and trust this, you can apply them to getting gas or, applying for a Nobel Prize and everything in between. That is what helps us to anchor ourselves in the proper and best use of our time here, in my somewhat not humble opinion.
No, your answer resonates with me, and it makes me think of a Ralph Waldo Emerson poem that I have at my desk. And part of that, and I'm going to paraphrase, about having known that you've left someone or something better.
Yeah.
And all of
exactly.
that. And it's funny because now that you've said the 3 words that described you, I'm going to be thinking about that today. I'm pretty sure I may know what one of the words are for myself, but I think that's really interesting. And I think that can be helpful. And I loved how you said that it could be volunteering. It doesn't matter what your vocation or avocation is. It's how it's that lens that you place over everything. And I do think when you place a certain lens over life, I do believe it can change.
It changes your experience of it.
Yes. Even dramatically in some cases.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you can feel more satisfied, because when you're evaluating your, and I'm going to put it in air quotes, success in this journey on external validation or reward or acknowledgement of whatever it is that you've done, it becomes very uncertain, because we never know how we're going to be rewarded, whether it's a promotion or a great salary or a great retirement, or whatever the things are. But when we're guided in all of those decisions and all of those experiences and all of those pivots, those changes from one career to the next, or leaving a career and going into this other space, or going from a career and dialing down to care for a loved one, all of those things, when they're done with those same clear, vetted attentions and intentions, that time becomes differently experienced. It's not any longer a punishment or a sadness or a huge loss. It's simply a transition into another expression of the same intention.
No, that totally makes sense to me. And I like how you chunked it out, because it's a lot of information to take in. And as you're talking, I'm
deep thoughts.
Yeah, deep thoughts. I think that was well said, very deep. So as we wind down to our end of our conversation, though, I know this is a question you wanted me to ask, and I think it's actually perfect for a prime life. And what does midlife crisis mean to you, or what does midlife mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things, we tend to be living longer and healthier journeys. So midlife seems to shift depending on kind of, I remember when I was young, I didn't think I thought my age was old. I mean,
Exactly.
Wilford Brimley was like my age. Like, what? That man was like ancient. Are you kidding me? How is that possible?
I know. So, I totally agree with that.
I don't know if it's hair dye or Botox, but anyway, we're all looking and feeling a little bit differently. However, I think midlife is that it can be that anchor point that says, looking back and looking forward, I might have been on autopilot for the time that is behind me. I might have been fulfilling agreements that I never remembered making about what my life had to look like and how it had to be shaped. And now as I look at the remaining runway, which is, again, still significant, how do I want to now be more intentional and more present and make better decisions about who I am and how I can leave these moments that all accumulate to the rest of my life in a place that I'm proud of. And so I used to, when I was thinking about, people would call it a midlife crisis. And I reject that term. I think it's a midlife awakening.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, whether it's midlife where they're finishing off their runway in a career, or whether it's the later part of midlife where they're contemplating shifting out of the career that they chose and going into more of a partial or full retirement, I think it's that same awakening of looking inward and looking around in a much more strategic way for their journey. Because for a lot of people, we've been living our journeys either for the people who set us up for the journey or for the people that we brought in along the way, our children or loved ones. And as we're moving into that other next phase of our lives, it's not about being selfish. It's about being interested in that journey of self and looking inward and outward to figure out how we can align that in the best possible way.
I think that was well said. I love awakening. I love inward and outward. I just really appreciate how you described many things on today's podcast. I think the words that you use are going to help many people who they haven't already helped. I'm sure those that have read, and not just about the book, but just your spirit in general. And
thank you.
Thank you for being with me today. But before we leave, we always have a final question. And then I'm going to ask you how individuals can get in touch with you if they'd like. So we're going to put everything in the show notes. So Dr. B, you've had a very interesting career. You have an interesting career. You've done a lot of different things. You're definitely resilient, persistent, all of those things. But why do you wake up every day and do what you do?
So that goes back to a different book, most likely, but I
why not?
Maybe little landslides, but I think we all have the moments that collect to shape our experiences and our intentionality about life. And I mentioned earlier my parents. Both of my parents had mental health issues and substance issues, and both of them died at relatively young ages, having kind of, especially my father, having buried themselves in pain and despair and a victim mindset. And so every day that I wake up, I look at the opportunity to be able to influence other people's experiences of themselves, to see where their power begins and ends, to see where their joy can be brought from, so that they're not living those lives of quiet and sometimes quite loud and injurious despair. I think about all the pain that I've experienced over the course of my life and the pain that I've given to others. And it's always been about not being able to see very clearly and exercise respectfully where my power begins and ends, where I can step into a moment with clarity and with love and with joy and with intention. And I wish that I could have been able to give that wisdom and that opportunity for change to both of my parents so that they could have lived better lives. I couldn't. So I give it to the people who I can. Yeah.
Well, that's a beautiful ending to our episode today.
Thank you.
Dr. B, if individuals want to get in touch with you, what is the best way?
Best way probably is to hop on over to my website, drbridgetcooper.com. You'll have it in the show notes, just in case you want to spell Bridget in a Irish or, German way or something. Anyway, I think it's the British spelling, but I think they can reach me on my website. They have links to my books. There's links to send me a note, and my email, bridget@drbridgetcooper.com, just so you can really practice your typing skills. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. B, again for joining me today. And to our listeners, we appreciate you tuning in, and another great episode of the Prime Life podcast. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.